Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Mesechet Terumot. We are up to Perek Aleph, Mishnah Bet. Today's Mishnah should be Le'nushmat Neria Ben Svedlana Aranbayv Menuchato Began Eden. Amen. In yesterday's Mishnah, we learned that a deaf mute, a person can neither speak nor hear. He cannot separate Terumah, and if he did, the Terumah is invalid. Today's Mishnah is going to deal with the case of a deaf person who can speak. A deaf person who can speak but he cannot hear, he may not separate terumah. But if he did separate terumah, his terumah is a valid terumah, because since this person can speak, he has the legal ability to separate terumah. But since he cannot hear, he should not separate terumah in the first place, because the Mefarshim explain he must hear the blessing that he recites before doing this mitzvah. And the Rav expounds to explain that before doing a mitzvah, we recite a blessing in which we thank Hashem for having sanctified us. He sanctified us by commanding us to do mitzvot. The halacha is that a person has to hear the words of the blessing that he makes, which a deaf person cannot do. Now, the portion he separates is nevertheless a valid terumah, because even if someone did not recite the blessing before doing he didn't recite the blessing before doing a mitzvah, the mitzvah is effective. We say en brachot ma'akvot. The blessing does not hold back the performance of the mitzvah, so he shouldn't ideally do it, but if he did, it counts. Now, the Mishnah states a general rule about the word cheresh, which was used here in connection with a deaf person who can speak, but in the first Mishnah it was a deaf person who cannot speak nor hear. Now, the Mishnah says, cheresh shedibru bo chachamim b'chol makom sheno lo shomeh v'lo medaber. Wherever the chachamim say the word cheresh, they mean someone who cannot hear and cannot speak, like in the previous Mishnah. Only where they add that he can speak, like in our Mishnah, cheresh hamdaber, that's when they refer to a person who has the power of speech. Now, although the Mefarshim point out this is not an absolute rule, there are places where the Mishnah uses the word cheresh without any added description, and it refers to a deaf person who can speak, like in Chagiga, in Yevamot. This is the general rule. That is in Rabotai of Mishnah Bet. Now, in Mishnah Aleph yesterday, we also discussed that a minor does not have the legal ability in the halacha to separate terumah. Mishnah Gimel is going to cite two other opinions. Katan shelo hevi shtei sarot, Rabbi Yehuda omer terumato terumah. If a minor who has not grown 2 pubic hairs separates terumah, Rabbi Yehuda says that his terumah is a valid terumah. Now we know a minor is not allowed to separate terumah in the first place, but if he did, the separated portion is a valid terumah. But even according to Rabbi Yehuda, a minor has the ability to separate terumah only after he reaches the age of chinuch, which is he's old enough to be trained, to be taught how to do mitzvot. Rabbi Yehuda agrees that terumah separated by a child that's younger than the age of chinuch is not valid. Now, the words used by Rabbi Yehuda, if you notice, what does he say? Katan shelo hevi shtei sarot, a minor who has not grown 2 pubic hairs. That a person could think is apparently referring to a boy who is old enough to be an adult, either 13 for a boy or 12 for a girl, but he's just lacking the 2 hairs. Now, even though Rabbi Yehuda says that a much younger child who separates terumah, if he's in the age of chinuch, it's valid, why did he say the pubic hairs? He stated a minor who has not yet grown pubic hairs to teach that even a minor of advanced age is forbidden to separate terumah in the first place if he didn't bring the 2 pubic hairs. Rabbi Yossi says, Im ad shelo ba leonat nidarim, if a minor separated terumah before he reached the age of vows, which is 12 for a boy, 11 for a girl, we will explain what this means. And terumato terumah, his terumah is not valid terumah. Umisheba leonat nidarim terumato terumah. But if he separated it after he reached the age of vows, his terumah is a valid terumah. What is that exactly the age of vows? The Rab tells us the age of vows begin when a boy reaches the age of 12 and a girl reaches the age of 11. It's called the age of vows because a vow made by someone of this age is binding, as long as provided that he or she understands the concept of vows. He's not supposed to do it. But if he's not supposed to do it. If he separated after he reached the age of vows, it's valid. Now we know a vow. What's a vow? A neder. It's a statement in which a person says that that this item is forbidden to himself or others. Now the item becomes asur because the neder gives it a level of sanctity. Separating terumah is similar because when you separate terumah, you give the separated portion the sanctity of terumah. So Rabbi Yossi says, just like the age of vows suffices to make a vow, make something have sanctity that you can't use it, so too it suffices with respect to separating terumah. That's how Rabbi Yossi says it. And the Rab tells us, the halacha ki Rabbi Yossi, the halacha follows Rabbi Yossi. If a minor separated terumah before he reached the age of vows, it's invalid. If he reached the age of vows and he separated, terumah is valid. You shouldn't have done it, but it is valid. The halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. That is then Rabotai, today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.